Howdy folks, welcome to God in Genesis study. My name is Sam Troyer and I will be your study leader today. The title to today's study is Dig Another Well. This is lesson 39 in a series from the book of Genesis. Today's study passage is Genesis 26:12 to 32. You can find these class videos on speakthegoodword.com on the God in Genesis page, or you can find them on my YouTube channel by searching Samuel Troyer. The character of the patriarch Isaac is the subject of today's discussion. Adversity comes to most of us at some point, and Isaac was no exception. The envious Philistines quarreled with Isaac's people and took away or stopped up his wells. How did Isaac manage that adversity? What were the results of the way he handled it? What can we learn from Isaac and his response to his detractors? Listen up. In his book, The Pressure's Off, psychologist Larry Crabb uses a story from his childhood to illustrate our need to delight in God through adversity. One Saturday afternoon, he says, I decided I was a big boy and could use the bathroom without anyone's help. So I climbed the stairs, closed and locked the door behind me, and for the next few minutes felt very self-sufficient. Then it was time to leave. I couldn't unlock the door. I tried with every ounce of my 3-year-old strength, but couldn't do it. I panicked. I felt again like a very little boy as the thought went through my head, I might spend the rest of my life in this bathroom. My parents, and likely the neighbors, heard my desperate scream. Are you okay? Mom shouted through the door. She couldn't open from the outside. Did you fall? Have you hit your head? I can't unlock the door, I yelled. Get me out of here. I wasn't aware of it right then, but Dad raced down the stairs, ran to the garage to find the ladder, hauled it off the hooks, and leaned it against the side of the house just beneath the bedroom window. With adult strength, he pried it open, then climbed into my prison, walked past me, and with that same strength, turned the lock and opened the door. Thanks, Dad, I said, and ran out to play. That's how I thought the Christian life was supposed to work. When I get stuck in a tight place, I should do all I can to free myself. When I can't, I should pray. Then God shows up. He hears my cry, get me out of here, I want to play, and unlocks the door to the blessings I desire. Sometimes he does. But now, no longer 3 years old and approaching 60, I'm realizing the Christian life doesn't work that way. And I wonder, are any of you, of us, content with God? Do we even like him when he doesn't open the door we most want opened? When a marriage doesn't heal, when rebellious kids still rebel, when friends betray, when financial reverses threaten our comfortable way of life, when the prospect of terrorism looms, when health worsens despite much prayer, when loneliness intensifies and depression deepens, when ministries die. God has climbed through the small window into my dark room, but he doesn't walk by me to turn the lock that I couldn't budge. Instead, he sits down on the bathroom floor and says, come sit with me. He seems to think that climbing into the room to be with me matters more than letting me out to play. I don't always see it that way. Get me out of here, I scream. If you love me, unlock the door. Dear friend, the choice is ours. Either we can keep asking him to give us what we think will make us happy, to escape our dark room and run to the playground of blessings, or we can accept his invitation to sit with him, for now perhaps in darkness, and to seize the opportunity to know him better and represent him well in this difficult world. Our reaction to circumstances and people is a pretty good indication of our spiritual maturity. I'd like for you to think about that for a moment. Our reaction to circumstances and people is a pretty good indication of our spiritual maturity. Anyone can be magnanimous in good times. Strength of character is made obvious when adversity strikes. Unfavorable treatment is the test of our character. A child will respond in kind to favorable treatment. Human nature will respond to what is favorable with good humor. A mature Christian can respond to evil with good. How do you handle adversity? Can I cross your pet interests and still have you as my friend? Do you give up when there is adversity? Do you feel sorry for yourself? Do you fight back? I'd like to share with you a few quotes on adversity. Tim Hansel. Adversity can either destroy or build up, depending on our chosen response. Ted W. Angstrom. Adversity introduces a man to himself. Cripple him, and you have a Sir Walter Scott. Lock him in a prison cell, and you have a John Bunyan. Bury him in the snows of Valley Forge, and you have a George Washington. Raise him in abject poverty, and you have an Abraham Lincoln. Strike him down in infantile paralysis, and he becomes Franklin Roosevelt. Deafen him, and you have a Ludwig van Beethoven. Have him or her born black in a society filled with racial discrimination, and you have a Booker T. Washington, a Marian Anderson, a George Washington Carver. Call him a slow learner, retarded, and write him off as uneducable, and you have Albert Einstein. Quote from Merv Rosal. God could have kept Daniel out of the lion's den. He could have kept Paul and Silas out of jail. He could have kept the 3 Hebrew children out of the fiery furnace. But God has never promised to keep us out of hard places. What he has promised is to go with us through every hard place and to bring us through victoriously. We have here, in today's lesson, the example of the patriarch Isaac. He didn't respond perfectly, I don't think. He had some obvious flaws. He was a quieter man, it seemed like, than maybe his father or maybe his children and so on later on. But he did respond in some good ways, and we can learn from him. Let me read for you. I'll hang out for that just a little bit. He faced unjust adversity in a way that is a good example for us today. Okay, just a bit of a background to our text. Before we actually look at our formal text, I want to look at the first part of Genesis 26. Let me read for you Genesis 26, 1-6. God warned Isaac not to go down to Egypt during the current famine. Genesis 26, 1-6. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac settled in Gerar. Isaac was obedient to God's command here. He didn't go down to Egypt like his dad did. During the famine, he hung around. He still got in trouble. Isaac followed his father in telling a lie. Reading on in verse 6 of Genesis 26. So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, She is my sister. For he feared to say my wife, thinking lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, she is your wife. How then can you say she is my sister? Isaac said to him, Because I thought lest I die because of her. Abimelech said, What is this you've done to us? One of the people might have easily lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. So this is about 100 years after the incident in Egypt. maybe 90 years since Abraham's incident with Abimelech. This was most likely actually a later Abimelech. That was a title for the ruler of the Philistines. It was like a pharaoh. Isaac didn't want to die for having a beautiful wife. He was afraid. Does that sound familiar? Deception, it seemed like, followed the patriarchs down through Jacob, and it was only stopped with Joseph, who was an honest man. It seems like Abraham had problems with honesty. Isaac did also. Jacob certainly did. And then Joseph, who was really honest, seemed to have broken that generational fault in that family. God told Isaac to stay in this land for a while and that he would bless him. Verses 12 and 13 of Genesis 26. Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. It happened. He prospered greatly. He waxed great and went forward. Progress there was in his life. There was one problem. There was envy. The Philistines envied Isaac. Verse 14 says, he had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. There was trouble because the Philistines became resentful of his success, of his wealth. Welcome to adversity. We can learn from Isaac in this passage of Scripture how to manage adversity. Adversity is not all bad. It is necessary to bring growth and maturity to our lives. It's all in the management of that adversity. How do we manage it? The results are not so much dependent on the adversity itself as it is on our response to it. What are some principles that we can take from this story of Isaac and the Philistine people? Let's read our formal text beginning in verse 12 of Genesis 26. And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying that the water is ours. So he called the name of the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, for now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. From there he went up to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you, and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. When Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzah his advisor and Phicol the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you? They said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they arose early and exchanged oaths. And Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." The first lesson that I would like to take from this passage is that Christians should expect adversity. It's a normal thing in our Christian experience. It's not abnormal. We are not odd. We are not merely unlucky. We are not different in this way. We're not the only ones that face adversity. It's a normal thing that a Christian should experience. And I say that, and I hope that you will consider this as in your next time you face adversity, that you're not weird. It's not unusual. It's a normal thing in our experience. It's not that we would want adversity. None of us do. We would rather run from it. We would rather avoid it. We do not like it. We do not want it to happen. We should expect it to happen, though. It's part of being human, and God does not spare His children from the human experience. Nor is it that all adversity is an attack from Satan. Some would say that when they experience adversity, ill health, whatever it may be, a reversal in their financial thing, that this is an attack from Satan. Not necessarily. Satan will attack the believer who is living out his faith in a dynamic way. Satan does hate the work of God. Satan hates to see the spread of the gospel. Satan does not like happy, blessed believers. And he will oppose every good work of God. But we should probably be more concerned if there is no adversity in our experience. If we have smooth sailing in life, we need to be asking some questions. If everything is smooth sailing, are we maybe lukewarm? Maybe Satan isn't worried about us. Isaac followed God's instruction in being where he was and do what he was doing. God had promised a blessing, and it happened. God had not promised adversity, it still happened. So God promised a blessing. Isaac here followed his instructions, and he had promised him a blessing, and it happened, but he also got adversity. Genesis 26 verse 15. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abram his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are too much mightier than we." Isaac didn't go looking for trouble. He didn't ask for it. He didn't make some mistake that brought it on. Sometimes that happens, but not in Isaac's case here. It just came. It is normal part of life. Receiving the blessing of God does not mean we will be free from adversity. Think about that. Receiving the blessing of God does not mean we will be free from adversity. One does not rule out the other. We can be blessed of God and still face strong adversity. It happens all the time. In the life of Isaac, it seemed to come as a direct result of the blessing of God. The Philistines were envious of the way that God had blessed Isaac and his prosperity. They took steps to stop that prosperity or to cause it to move away. Listen to some scripture on adversity. Jesus said in John 16, "I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But take heart, I have overcome the world." Jesus promises tribulation. Paul says in Acts 14, "When they had preached the gospel to that city and had made many disciples, they returned to Lystra and Iconium and Antioch." Paul is experiencing the tribulation. "Strengthening the souls of the disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and saying that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God." Peter, writing in 1 Peter 4, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you." James in James 1 verse 2, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." Not if, but when. So we should expect adversity. It will come. It is normal for the believer, and we need to understand this. So that's my first point, is that Christians should expect adversity. The second main point is that Christians must persevere in adversity. From our study passage in Genesis 26, reading from verse 17. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names his father had given them. And when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he gave its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." Christians must persevere. We see the example here of Isaac persevering, digging another well. Wells were serious necessities in those days. No water, no prosperity, water for people, water for cattle. Wells were hard to dig. They didn't have well diggers like we have today. They had to hand dig those wells. How do you know how good the shovels they had? And wells didn't always reach water. Sometimes they were dry holes. Country singer Paul Overstreet sings about our lesson today, and he calls Isaac Ike. He says, Ike had a blessing from the Lord above, gave him a beautiful woman to love, place to live, some land to farm, 2 good legs and 2 good arms. The devil came sneaking around one night, decided he would do a little evil to Ike, figured he hit old Ike where it hurts, so he filled up Ike's wells with dirt. Ike went out to get his morning drink, got a dip full of dirt, and in his heart it did sink. He knew it was the devil, so he said with a grin, "God bless me once, he can do it again." So when the rains don't fall, and the crops all fail, and the cow ain't putting any milk in the pail, don't sit around waiting for a check in the mail. Just pick up your shovel and dig another well. Pick up your shovel and dig another well. That's the title to this study this morning, Dig Another Well. We give up too easily when faced with adversity. We tuck in our tails and run. There are times when we need to move on. Don't get me wrong, but often we do it too early. You would say, if it's going to be like this, I give up. God must not want me to do this. This must be a sign that God wants me out of here. We have to be careful. Is it really that God wants us out of there, or we're giving up? Many years ago, a little girl was totally blind. She was blinded as an infant and as a result of an accident. She lived to be over 90 years old. She became well known in the American church. She wrote many popular Christian songs and choruses. Her name was Fanny Crosby. When she was only 8 years old, she wrote, "Oh, what a happy child I am, although I cannot see. I am resolved that in this world contented I will be. How many blessings I enjoy that other people don't. To weep and sigh because I'm blind, I cannot and I won't." Life can be so unfair. I know I've felt that way. And it just seems that way. Our best intentions are misread. Our best efforts come to nothing. We are misunderstood and unfairly criticized. We would like to collect our little footballs and go home. It's just more than we can tolerate. When he was 7 years old, his family was forced out of their home on a legal technicality, and he had to work to help support them. At age 9, his mother died. At 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. He wanted to go to law school, but his education wasn't good enough. At 23, he went into debt to become a partner in a small store. 26, his business partner died, leaving him a huge debt that took years to repay. At 28, after courting a girl for 4 years, he asked her to marry him. She said no. At 37, on his third try, he was elected to Congress. but 2 years later he failed to be reelected. 41, his 4-year-old son died. 45, he ran for Senate and lost. 47, he failed as the vice presidential candidate. At 49, he ran for the Senate again and lost. At 51, he was elected President of the United States. His name was Abraham Lincoln, a man many consider the greatest leader the country ever had. Some people get all the breaks, or not. We must persevere in adversity. Reading from Hebrews 10. Therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. So that's the second point. Christians must persevere in adversity. It's a must for us. We must persevere in adversity. Third one is God blesses in spite of adversity. God's blessing is still there. Just because we have problems, it doesn't mean that God has abandoned us. It feels that way, but it's not true. He is still working with us in so many ways. He probably didn't bring the problems we face, but He allowed them. There is nothing that we as believers face that hasn't been filtered through our Father's loving hands. Firmly believe that. There is nothing that we as believers face that hasn't been filtered through our Father's loving hands. We believe in the faithfulness of God. God is absolutely faithful. Our resource is from Him, not our own resilience. He continues to take care of us even though we suffer adversity in one area of our lives. That faith in God can carry us through even the most monstrous difficulty. Isaac was able to dig new wells. Isaac was able to dig new wells. He kept hitting water. He kept on seeing the provision of God. He kept on seeing the hand of God in his life. Amazing. It's a little bit like a ship. It moves best when it is slightly athwart the wind, when it has to keep its sails tight and attend to its course. Ships like men do poorly when the wind is directly behind, pushing them sloppily on their way so that no care is required in steering or in the management of the sails. The wind seems favorable, for it blows in the direction one is heading, but actually it is destructive because it induces a relaxation in tension and skill. What is needed is a wind slightly opposed to the ship, for then tension can be maintained and juices can flow and ideas can germinate. For ships like men respond to challenge. God has promised that we will not be overwhelmed. He will not allow adversity that is impossible to bear. That's His promise. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, a very familiar verse that you probably know, says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation He will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it." I'd like to read for you Psalm 124. "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side," let Israel now say, "if it had not been in the Lord who was on our side when people rose up against us, then they would have swallowed us up alive. When their anger was kindled against us, then the flood would have swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Then over us would have gone the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord who has not given us as prey to their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth." So that's the first 3 points. We will face adversity. We must persevere in adversity. God blesses in spite of adversity. And the fourth point is this: God uses adversity to bring a blessing. Robert Murray M'Cheyne says this: "Every wise workman takes his tools away from the work from time to time that they may be ground and sharpened. So does the only wise Jehovah take His ministers oftentimes away into darkness and loneliness and trouble. that he may sharpen and prepare them for harder work in his servants. His ship was wrecked, and the only survivor washed up on a small uninhabited island. He was exhausted. He cried out to God to save him. Every day he scanned the horizon searching for help. Finally, he managed to build a rough hut and put his few articles in that hut. One day, coming home from hunting for food, he was stung with grief to see his little hut in flames and a cloud of smoke. The worst had happened. But early the next day, a ship drew in and rescued him. He asked the crew, "How did you know I was here?" They replied, "We saw your smoke signal." Maybe the difficulty you have now is a smoke signal that will lead to great blessing. Isaac went up to Beersheba, our story tells us. God uses adversity to bring a blessing. Verse 23 of Genesis 26, from there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him in the same night and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, I am with you, and will bless you, and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well again. The problem caused him to move. The problems, mainly Philistines. Whether he realized it or not, he was moving back into the promised land. He was moving back to where God had chosen. He was moving back toward God's plan. How often adversity will drive us back toward God and his plan for us. It causes us to rely on God. It drives us closer to God. Often we do not even realize that it is happening. Often we cannot even see what is going on. Were it not for the adversity that Isaac experienced, he would probably have been content to live in Gerar. He would have been outside of God's plan and purpose. He would not have received the bigger blessing of being in God's plan. We're so human. We tend to follow the path of least resistance. We tend to gravitate toward the lowlands of the world. Often it will take adversity to drive us back up on the higher plane that God intends for his people. Were it not for adversity, we would be content to live outside of his perfect will and plan for us. A quote from Oswald Chambers: "A saint's life is in the hands of God as a bow and arrow in the hands of an archer. God is aiming at something the saint cannot see. He stretches and strains, and every now and again the saint says, 'I cannot stand anymore.' But God does not heed. He goes on stretching until his purpose is in sight, then he lets fly." We are here for God's design, not for our own. God met Isaac on his return to Beersheba. Verse 24 of our study passage. The Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you and will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. There was closeness there that had not been there before. There was communication. There was a blessing from God. And people noticed the working of God. Abimelech and his cohorts came up to meet with Isaac. They noticed what was going on. Even their adversaries noticed the working of God. They could see that God was with Isaac. They saw the new wells. They saw the persistence of Isaac. They could sense that there was something special here. One of the biggest witnesses there is to the presence of God in our lives is the way that we respond to adversity. I'd like to repeat that because I think it's one of the key points to make in this lesson today. One of the biggest witnesses there is to the presence of God in our lives is the way we respond to adversity. We don't give up. We don't grow bitter. We don't blame everyone but ourselves. We don't blame God. We keep on digging wells. We keep trusting and living in obedience. So when the rains don't fall, Paul Overstreet, and the crops all fail, and the cow ain't putting any milk in the pail, don't sit around waiting for a check in the mail. Just pick up your shovel and dig another well. Pick up your shovel and dig another well. I hope you've enjoyed this class this morning, this lesson from Genesis 26, dig another well, on how to deal with adversities. Dig another well. God bless.